So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being in attendance for the Flash Talk. It's like a little bit of a full circle moment because I think the last time I was here, I was giving you all like preliminary findings. So this is the real findings. I titled this presentation for the Flash Talk, The Lived Realities of Black Male Clinical Social Workers. And I honestly debated on tweaking it a little bit to talk about or even add the concept of the journey of Black men becoming clinicians specifically. And I want to start also with a photo. This is Charles Kinsey. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with this image, but this is a gentleman with his hands up and all laying on the floor. He is a behavioral health specialist, and he specifically works with young adults with autism. And what happened here is the young adult was playing with a toy truck in the parking lot of the facility in Florida. The police were called. They assumed that it was a firearm. It was not. Police came, tried. Oops, sorry. You gotta go to the next one. Oh, my bad. I'm like, why is this? Okay, so yes, this is the photo. My fault. The police were called, and because of the young adult could not respond to commands and was nonverbal, he could not put the toy truck down. The clinician at this point came to try to mitigate the situation, and he was also told to kind of get on the floor, hands up, and was still shot. And I use this as an example as to kind of what catapulted my interest in understanding the experiences and the journeys and its association with criminalization as well. And I thought that it also came full circle coming from CSWE's, annual, conference with the theme being disability justice as well. Right, so just wanted to kind of root the presentation in that form. So, when we're talking about the background and the purpose, how did I get here? What was the significance? What we do know is that clinical social workers are the largest group of mental health providers within the U.S., according to the U.S. Labor Statistics of 2022. Roughly, I want to say the numbers are around maybe 250,000 or a little north of that. But what we also know, according to the CSWE, is that Black men remain significantly underrepresented in social work in general, making up about 3.5%. And that does not account for who we consider clinicians or clinical social workers, when we also understand that a consistent barrier, according to the ASWB's reports, is that Black individuals, African American individuals, are half likely to pass the examination, which then turns into a gatekeeping barrier for future clinicians as well. So in addition to that, when I began to kind of do a little bit of research, from my research, I simply just looked to see what literature is out there on clinical social workers. And there's a lot of clinical social work practice and recommendations on how to work with African Americans and things of that nature, which is great. But when I thought about flipping the script and understanding what are the service providers doing and what are those experiences, you couldn't find much. So what I attempted to do is really utilize pulling from experiences of male nurses who are also men in female dominated positions or professions, as well as educators or K through 12 teachers. And what I noticed is that there were some themes of isolation, gendered expectations and things of that nature. So I really began to kind of massage the data a little bit, or massage the literature, to understand what are some correlations and how can we or myself kind of put the experiences of Black male clinicians in the forefront and in the literature as well. So the purpose here was, just overall explore how Black male clinicians develop their professional identities, especially when they are minorities of the minority in a profession, right? What if you cannot see yourself very much within rooms, how do you shape that perspective on how you carry yourself? And I wanted to understand that through a culture and a contextual lens. So for an example, understanding gendered norms. The literature indicates that, with certain professions such as nursing, there's an assumption that males are not as empathetic, or males are given more physical tasks, to address, So in the contextual aspect of it, I was also curious to know what does certain contextual pieces like isolation, because again, the literature shows that a lot of males in these helping professions feel a sense of isolation or do not have a sense of community in those spaces as well. And now just to tie it into what that looks like within clinical practice and social work as well. And then overall, just on a very foundational, perspective, just highlighting the strategies and the narratives and amplifying the voices of these individuals who are usually silent. Yeah. So how did I do it? So I utilized a qualitative approach, and it was from an exploratory lens. I utilized a theoretical framework of intersectionality to also look beyond race and gender as mitigating factors on their experiences. I use social learning theory to understand what are they learning from environments to understand how they show up. And then lastly, occupational segregation theory, which pretty much indicates based on your gender identity or based on your race and gender identity, you are susceptible to either be in certain hierarchy positions in a field of work or on a lateral level, a specific type of field. For this example, maybe a lot of black men may go into private practice, right? Versus other clinical reps that they can take. The sampling method that I utilized was propulsive and convenient. I did utilize an eligibility survey to indicate if individuals self-identified as black males. I was also interested in ensuring that they had at least 5 years of practice to account a little bit to see if there were any influences of the pandemic that played a role in their experiences. And recruitment was done through a flyer that was posted on social media, as well as connected with the National Association of Black Social Workers and the LCSW as well. So as far as data collection now, after individuals were utilized or put into the focus groups, as a conclusion, they did a demographic survey. A lot of the information was more so just understanding, age, location, the amount of times that they passed the amount of times it took them to pass the ASWB exam, clinical examination specifically, sexual orientation, things of that nature, to really get a bit more of a nuanced and contextual perspective. And focus groups, the intention around focus groups over individual interviews was more so rooted in the context of just utilizing an Afrocentric perspective. What we know, again, with the data, when we're talking about the association of black men and mental health, the most, studied informal support system they consider is the barbershop, right? So when we're talking about the barbershop, my assumption is when you sit and you observe these conversations, that is somewhat of a focus group. That is a conversation. So it was more so the intent was to, create some type of environment that may be familiar for some and maybe not all. And to further be inclusive of that, with the literature with the literature speaking about isolation of a lot of these male professionals working in female-dominated fields, I didn't think that having these interviews in isolated one-to-one interactions would be the most effective. So that was the additional layer as to why focus groups was the best approach. And I'm really glad I actually did it because the conversation was great. The questions were also influenced by the theoretical framework. So when asking them about what are some of the influences or what are some examples that you have of other black men in the field that you've learned, that was me pulling from social learning theory, things of that nature. Yeah. And then lastly, when it comes to data analysis, I utilized the framework method, which was very rigorous. And what that entails is literally laying out your entire data set in a matrix associated, and the matrix can go by an interview question, by major themes, and then from there you just continue to sparse it apart and pull it apart before uploading it into Vivo to then you can code it. So it was a pretty rigorous process. It was about 180 pages of transcripts and over maybe I think it was 12 and a half hours of audio to go through. So so what does this all mean? What does it mean to become a black male clinician? I'm not going to go through the entire demographics, but just some things to highlight. I did end up getting 21 participants to participate. That averaged out to be 6 focus groups. I'm sorry, I keep messing this up, yeah. They averaged out to be 6 focus groups, and it was about 4 to 6 participants per focus group. And something that I took away from the methodology here is that sweet spot for a healthy focus group was around that 5%, that 5 mark. Anything over that kind of got a little lost in a sense. So that was something that I took away from that. Around the age range, over half were between 35 to 54. I had a big proportion of those individuals come from metropolitan areas. And what I really did appreciate about the outreach too is that we were able to even get some folks from the U.S. Virgin Islands, to participate as well. So that experience and how similar it was to the mainland was very, very interesting as well. When it came to the exam attempts, over half, it took 2 to 4 times for them to pass the ASWB LCSW exam specifically. And then majority of those participants held the master's degrees. So they were also the themes that I have, from 1 to 5 here. But I wanted to take a brief moment to highlight 2 of the 5 that I had, which is the first one being defining authenticity in clinical spaces, which looks like balancing self-expression with professional norms. And then the second being mentorship and networks as survival, connecting with other Black men, foster resilience and growth. In the first quote, even before I get into the quote, this idea of defining authenticity was very interesting to the interesting discussion within those focus groups, because authenticity for a lot of Black men within these conversations was like, second guessing how they want to wear their hair, second guessing how they want to dress, how they want to show up and speak, wondering and trying to kind of assess a space to understand how they need to assimilate or adjust to ensure that they do not stand out too much, right? And then secondly was this concept of mentorship. It rang supreme in every focus group. This idea of having connections, with folks who have gone through the process as a guiding star to kind of avoid pitfalls as well. So the first quote I want to amplify here, and I also want us to pay attention to the cadence and the language here. I was intentional on not trying to kind of clean the quote up to lose the voice and the essence of it. So this is what they were saying, right? So this quote connects with the defining authenticity in clinical spaces. The quote reads, "At my agency, they gave me a case with a young Black boy who bullied queer students. The senior clinician said little, but the message was clear. You're Black, he's Black, so you should take it. What they didn't know was that I'm also queer. And let me tell you, the way they spoke about an openly gay colleague, OMG. So I knew I couldn't show that side of me. Anyways, the case went poorly, and when I sought help, all I heard was, stick with it. In that moment, I realized I needed to get serious about my proper practice." So within this quote, and then again, this is not just like a aha, like gotcha kind of quote, but this was a consistent kind of theme on having these experiences of, just linking an individual with their race and identity, race and gender, without associating or thinking about other identities that might reign supreme for them as well. And the challenges with supervision and mentorship, which then led to changing and segregating the occupation even further to another type, right? So we see that within this vignette here, where his queer identity could not be amplified due to challenges with authenticity, the challenges with supervision and mentorship by just saying just stick with it, and then the interest in wanting to just go into private practice as a form of safety as well. So the next one, here, this is more of an amplification on the mentorship and network as survival. The quote reads, "To be honest, listening to everyone talk about their mentors got me feeling a type of way. Later on, after probing, those feelings was named as anger and jealousy. because I never had that. Since my MSW, I've been figuring it out alone. Hearing you all speak about how your mentors did this and that has been thinking how differently things might have been if someone had guided me. You all seem to have light and motivation for social work. I think mine went out a while ago. I'm just over it." So we also now see this concept now of, if you are missing mentorship or lack thereof, it may potentially lead to early burnout as well. And what we also understand too when we're talking about, the conclusions and implications now is that we do have a strong dependence on recruitment that is absolutely important in social work. But what I began to question is what are the measures and what are the programming utilized to retain? Because a lot of these individuals were expressing interest in it, exiting the field completely. And it was, the trajectory seems so similar for so many of them, which is, starting the MSW in isolation, maybe being the quote unquote only one most of the time in classes, to being the only one in many of their clinical placements, to then feeling tokenized. And that tokenization turned into imposter syndrome, That imposter syndrome then turned to burnout, or that turned into going into private practice. And usually because the lack of mentorship to maintain a successful private practice happened, they exit the field. So this has been a consistent trend from a lot of the individuals from those focus groups. So that the idea now is like, what are we doing, and how can we instill programming to maintain retention as well? And in addition to, how can we, continue to kind of find or implement Black men studies within social education as well. A potential future study is to really kind of conduct exit surveys for MSW students graduating to understand how prepared they feel to work with Black men. And from that preparation, maybe it is time for us to maybe create a Black men in social work, or just a development across the lifespan of Black men from infant to aging, to truly understand the scope of the unique experiences that they have for individuals to be more prepared. And overall, I just want to end with this quote that took me a very long time to conceptualize, but it just says, unpacking this journey shows that representation heals, mentorship sustains, and equity must be intentional. The next step is not just understanding the challenges, but transforming the system that create. And I want to thank you all.